What we're going to be talking about is mobile technology, and that is all the pieces that are involved, but more importantly, who the players are. I'm going to show some number of applications. I've got 450 apps here, another 450 here, and another 400 that I've tried and rejected. So we're not going to spend much time on those. You have some familiarity with this field, so the important topic today is going to be what's going on in the whole business environment surrounding this, and how is that going to affect the survival of the products, the direction of the products. Some people say they bought a smartphone. I say, well, how'd you get that? Well, the guy at the Verizon store said this was the best one. Well, of course, the guy at the Verizon store has no idea of your business needs or what other people are using or what things are. You know, this is just a cool phone. Why not? It's blue.
See, you can play games with other people.
Right.
That person across the room.
Or it's blue. Don't you like the blue? So most of you have some familiar. I'm going to do the presentation on the iPad. I'm going to link it also in with the iPhone. I can use the iPhone as the remote control for the iPad. I could do the presentation on here, send it right to the projector, not even have this involved if I wanted to. But I may use the remote sometime. But I could have used any one of 150 different smartphones. I use the iPhone. I'm sure if I looked at the 150 Android phones that are out there, I'd find a dozen that I liked better. But I'm sure they wouldn't integrate with the iPad as well as the iPhone, and that's part of my consideration. I'll also be doing the iPad, and some of you have seen that. If you want to play with this afterwards, feel free to do it, because it does seem more like play than work. But here's the key. Most people say, what about the keyboard? I don't like those keyboards. If I wanted to do serious computing or serious data entry, I would whip out that keyboard that you see there, which is the standard Mac wireless keyboard, standard size keys, sit it next to it and start to do the typing. And the question is, do you want a device like a laptop where you always have the keyboard with you, or where you have to take two things along? And my thinking is, I rarely need the keyboard. I would rather have the lightest device most of the time. There are keyboards that will actually fit in the case. You can shut the case and you're back to being like a laptop again, but I like it where it's separate and I don't have to use it all the time. But if you're really serious about a keyboard, this is the one you might want to consider. That's real. You can go on YouTube and you can see people typing on things like that, and the letters come up on the screen. So, yes. But this is the main screen of my iPad when I turn it on. Anybody recognize the background? It's a Duluth lighthouse. And I've got 100 variations of that picture that I edited using the iPad. I didn't take the picture with the iPad. Right in the middle of the screen you see one program, and it's called Keynote, and that's Apple's presentation program. So if I was going to do a presentation with a MacBook or something else, I might use Keynote or PowerPoint. On the iPad you use Keynote, and I use it all the time, and that's what you're seeing. This is a slide from Keynote. This isn't the screen of my iPad. This is a slide from a Keynote presentation, and I'm going to go on to the next slide, and it's what the heck is an app anyway? Because the word app slipped into our vocabulary and nobody ever explained what it was. Well, I've got my definition right here. An app is a program. You used to install programs, now you install apps. If you went and bought a copy of Microsoft Word, they would say this is an app. And most people think they're somehow different, but they're not. It means application program. I'm an old-timer in this business. I started out on the Apollo program in the aerospace business, then I went into healthcare systems, the earliest healthcare systems, as a technology person, project manager, software developer. So as an old-timer, I like to talk about programs, but they're apps, I guess. Some of the apps include things like this, where we are introduced to Winnie the Pooh and some bees, and the story begins. So the tablet also has a built-in book reader for iBook, for Apple Books, for Barnes & Noble, for Amazon. Their book readers are all available on this particular device. But more serious things, if you are studying to be in medical fields, you might want to use an X-ray app to be able to study X-rays. Or if you were a doctor and you were treating a patient who was half dying in the emergency room and you wanted to show him his broken bones, a picture of them, you could take the computer to him rather than having to drag the card over to a computer. The whole thing about mobile devices in healthcare is just phenomenal, monstrous. I have one list that shows healthcare applications on the iPad, and there's 210 applications. You look at the top, and it said page 1 of 3. You look above that, and it says A. So the A's have 600 applications, and the B's have so many and so many. So probably 10,000 medical apps today. Some of them, if you're going to be a dentist, there's a $400 app to learn dentistry, and another one for being an eye doctor, and there's a $1,000 app if you want to prepare for the bar exam. Rather than buying $1,000 worth of books and CDs, you give them $1,000 and they give you an app. You know, a kid bought it one time by accident, because the password was still there, and he clicked that app and downloaded it, and his father got the money back from Apple. More interesting for some people, here's an art app, and I'm just a real quick view of some apps. This one's a great one. It's $7 or $8, and you can take any period and any artist and any theme, and then you can go ahead and look at all the art pieces that are involved. Here's a more practical one. We were driving through Chicago not too long ago, and my wife was driving, so I had my eyes covered. It was in the rush hour. No, I was looking down at my iPad and following us through the traffic, and so if I could see, and that's moving along. That's the standard app that comes with the iPad. So if we'd noticed traffic ahead, I could have shown her how to reroute around it. But of course, almost all newspapers and magazines are going to be gone in printed form in our lifetimes, depending on how old some of us are. So these are all things that are available online. And this is just a snapshot, but what I want to talk to you is about the transformation that's happened. And if you look, starting in 1980, that's when the PC came out. And the Apple II came out in '78, the IBM PC came out in 1981, and here's the great big movement that's happened in 30 years. On the left is my Apple II, and on the right is a modern PC of some kind. And guess what? They both work the same. If I want to do word processing with the modern one or the Apple II, I sit down at the keyboard, call up the word processing program, type, and then print. And that's exactly what I did 30 years ago when I bought that computer. And people talk about, oh, the rapid pace of change. Things are just going at lightning speed. It was the only change between 1980 and today in PCs is they got a little faster each year, a little more memory each year, a little cheaper each year, and a little prettier each year. Next year, a little faster, a little more memory, a little prettier, a little cheaper, and that went on for 30 years, and they're the same thing. They're just a better version of that thing. So people ask about an iPad, or they ask about mobile devices, and they say, well, it's just another gadget, you know. Well, it isn't another gadget, and here's the slide that shows. PCs are going to continue off on kind of a similar trend. The mobile area is a totally new direction that most people don't understand at all. And if I show, this is the slide I took in my office a few years ago when I moved from one location to another. And of course I did what everybody does, just unplugged all the cords and threw them in a pile, didn't label them, and then dealt with that when I got to the location. But this is what I call the ugly age of computing. It started in 1980, it ended last year when the iPad was introduced in January of last year. That's a new era of computing. That's how big a deal this is. But will computers be around, real computers? This is my office computer set up right now. I have a 27-inch iMac on the left, I have a Dell laptop on the right, and an extra screen in the middle. And I use that iMac on the left for video processing. I do a lot of video work, and a 27-inch screen is just barely big enough to work on video. And it's got a terabyte of hard drive because 1 hour of high-definition video takes 40 gigabytes of memory.
Wow.
And of course you need a backup and everything. If you're doing stuff like that, you need a computer like that. Most of what I do, most of what you do, is not that stuff at all. So these devices are going to be around for a long time, but the trick is that tablets are going to put them in their place. And so if I get up in the morning and I start drinking coffee or eating my oatmeal, I pull this out and read 3 or 4 newspapers, then 3 or 4 technical magazines, check the stock market, check the weather, while I'm sitting there like a magazine. I was at a hotel out in Glacier Park a couple of weeks ago, and there was a sign at this cute little restaurant in the hotel, and it said, well, to keep the ambience, please don't bring your computer in. I said, well, that's a good rule. And then you go in there and you see somebody sitting there reading the newspaper. Now, if I'd have been in there and I'd have brought this, I'd have been reading a newspaper. Was this a computer, or is this a newspaper, or a book, or what is it? So anyway, I didn't push the point. The question is, who's all the players that are involved? There's the people who sell you your handset. There are the manufacturers. There are the carriers that you buy your service from. And the two big ones are right here: the operating systems and the app developers. And 30 years ago, these were how many operating systems were leaders in the last 30 years? How many PC operating systems? One? Do I hear two? One. It was Windows. In spite of the fact that everybody liked Macs and everything else and Linux and all that, there was one that survived, and it was because of that point right there. The app developers, if they don't develop for your operating system, you are not going to sell anything, computers or software. And so the question is today, I've got a list maybe later that shows 12 operating systems for mobile devices today. Some of them almost dead, a whole bunch of them sort of dying, but the obvious question is how many will survive if only one PC operating system really thrived in 30 years? How many of those 12 will be around 2 years from now? The whole point being, if you're buying things, it's one thing to waste $200 on a phone. What if you waste it and also you have to pay $40 a month for a service plan, and it's a mistake, or it's an operating system that's abandoned or not upgraded, or there's no app developers? Those are the kind of mistakes people made when they bought a Commodore PAT or an Apple II or a TRS-80. An Amiga. Yes, absolutely, an Amiga. And so we're going through that phase right now with this mobile technology. Here are the causes for this situation. How did we get into this predicament? Well, PCs have evolved, and they've evolved into dinosaurs. When you used to type on a typewriter and then got a word processor, the first version of Microsoft Word had 150 commands in it. The current version has 1,500 commands in it. The current version of Microsoft Windows has 100 million lines of instruction in it. All that does is make the computer turn on so you can do something, get another program to do stuff. And so that's what I consider a dinosaur, unwieldy, and all you want to do is type. You don't want a computer to help you find a way to the moon or design a new airplane or whatever. You want to type, do word processing, do a spreadsheet, maybe a PowerPoint presentation, and you've got a machine today that is used by every major scientist in the world, and we're all forced to use it. So that's what the evolution's been a problem. Mobility has been the holy grail. I worked in healthcare information systems for 30 years as a consultant, helped hospitals all over the country with their computers, and starting back in the middle 90s, people were building tablet devices, made 7 or 8 pounds, lugged around, used Windows, sort of, cost $6,000, and of course doctors hated them. They tried to do everything they could, and the mobility was terrible until last year. And so finally, with something like the iPad and other tablets, we've gotten there. The smartphones, they are the trigger. This is the thing that set it off. People found out there's a better way with interacting with a handheld device, and this is what started it. And the next thing that happened was tablets came out to be the answer to the real mobility issues of a larger screen and everything. One question I always ask is, do you have any idea when the design of this tablet would have first been drawn out and described by, not in Star Trek or something, but by a scientist? When would that have happened? I'll tell you. 1968.
Oh, I was going to say 69.
It would have made more sense in 69 because Alan Kay drew this picture out and described something with a touch screen where you downloaded programs. The internet wasn't developed until 69. So if the internet was around, that would have made some sense. But he designed it the year before the internet was announced. And he went to work for Xerox PARC, their research center. Steve Jobs showed up there about the same time in the middle of the 70s. Steve Jobs, we all know, walked away with the idea of the mouse and the graphical user interface, got the idea there, took it home and made a Macintosh in 1984. But he also would have met Alan Kay. He would have seen these drawings in 1975 probably, and been sitting on there thinking about it until last year when they started to sell it. Well, that's his pattern of development. But the other competitors sat on their thumbs and said in January of last year, we better make one of those too. Does anybody know how to make one of those? Hire somebody that knows how to make one. It should look like that, only be better, you know. Oh, so here's the most important slide of the whole presentation. And it's on the samples there if you want to take one of those along. Why is this a big deal in a general sense? Well, first of all, we have lightweight, small mobile devices. Everybody understands that. Second thing we have is a touch screen interface. That's all new. And the third thing we have is a different way of getting applications installed. Now, this means the hardware is new, the software is new, and the user interface is new. Now, is there anything else to a computer besides hardware, software, and the way you interact with it? That's the entire existence of a computer, and all three of them are new. So that's why this is not another gadget, not another gizmo of any kind. And I want to ask you on software today, app software, see if this rings any bells from the past. App software is easy to select, purchase, install, learn, and upgrade. Did you ever hear a computer program with any one of those 5 descriptions? Easy to do any of that. The downsides, there are some serious issues today. It's not all fun and games. First of all, the technology is very new, so there's a lot of questions. The cloud is a shaky environment today, putting everything out on the internet. The expertise is in short supply. The people who are Fortran and COBOL programmers from my day aren't positioned to do this kind of work. And as usual, the IT departments, the technology gurus, will do everything in their power. And if you don't believe it, read Dilbert. They'll do everything in their power to stop you from getting what you want. And vendors are going to come and go quickly, just like they do in every one of these periods of turmoil. Here's an important slide, but you can't read it here. It's on my blog, and it's on a sample here. But if you go to my blog, you'll click on it, and you get a big full-screen view of it. And I'm going to use some old technology here. Anybody use a laser pointer? This takes all the technologies that we're thinking about today, from desktops, laptops, netbooks, something called a flash laptop. Does anybody know what the MacBook Air is? Anybody have a MacBook? You can't buy MacBooks anymore. They're gone. And this was the hottest selling laptop for kids to take to school is the MacBook. They discontinued it last month.
What did they replace it with?
The MacBook Air, which is the 3-pound, gorgeous, thin device, has no hard drive and no optical drive.
Oh.
Now, the only reason that other companies don't have it right now, it costs $999, which was the price of the MacBook. When they dropped the MacBook Air, they dropped the MacBook. And the only reason every other company doesn't have them is because Apple's got the lock on the market for titanium aluminum material. And the way they make the device, they make a block of titanium and aluminum and saw out a hole and stick the computer in it. So it's a solid piece of tough material.
Wow.
Nobody else can buy it. Everybody else has to take some chunk of tin and push it against another one, bolt them all together and put the pieces in there. They're heavier, they're not as sturdy, and none of the other companies can get the material. But all of these companies over here on the left, HP, Dell, they all want to make, and the new name is Ultrabook. If you start hearing about an Ultrabook, it's kind of the next thing past Netbook. It's the Ultrabook. And they don't have hard drives. Part of the reason is because now you can get a solid state memory of up to 256 gigabytes, which a few years ago was a big hard drive.
Sure, yeah.
500 gigabytes on a laptop is pretty big today. And most people don't, unless they have 27,000 record albums or music on there, they don't need that. So the laptop of the future is not going to have a hard drive. It's going to rely on the cloud for some things and big solid state drives. That has better battery life, has better sturdier, no mechanical moving parts. And the DVDs and the CDs are dying anyway, so they are going to be gone. And as usual, Apple's just a year or two ahead of everybody else in taking and developing. So this shows, I'm going to go on, oops, close this. Here's the next version of the slide, and what I did was mark all the companies that are in different areas with X's, but then I highlighted the ones where people are kind of in a leading position. And what do you see? The old line computer companies, HP and Dell, big time up in the old technologies of PCs and laptops. Almost non-existent players in modern technology. You go over here on the left, you see three big ones, Apple, Microsoft, and Google, and I threw those in there, and you see Apple just dominates the technologies, not just one or two things, but everything. People say, well, what about a company that comes out with a new tablet? And I say, do they have anything else in the field, or do they just build a tablet and not have compatibility, not have app stores, not have service, not have name recognition, not have money in the bank? Google's got about $50 billion in the bank. Apple has $100 billion in the bank. So when they need to do something, they go buy a company, buy a technology, buy a patent, or buy a whole lot of employees to do it. So this is the different field now than it was over the last 30 years in terms of the players. Here's a confusing issue. If this is a tablet and this is a smartphone, right? What if I took the phone out of here and it didn't have a phone? What would I call this thing? What?
A tablet?
Well, a tablet.
A mini tablet.
Mini, that's a good word. So there are a couple of sizes, and there is one company that came out with one like this and one like this and one in between, called them all tablets. People were thinking this was a tablet, so if I call this a tablet, a lot of people would say I'd call this an iPod Touch, because that's what it is, but that's a brand name, and there is no name for the category of touchscreen devices like this, and so I came up with a name based on the fact that our original computers were desktops, our next computers were laptops. It's based on not what the thing does, but where do you use it? Well, I take this with me all the time, so these are my companion computers. So you're free to pass that around. I just came up with that name. But the different sizes are going to confuse people. There will not be available over the years 16 different sizes, because the app developers are not going to make a program that runs here, one that runs here, and then three different versions in between. If they do one here and one here, most of them are going to be satisfied and stop. In terms of, I'll show you a little vacation picture. It's always fun to have that. You've been across Montana lately? Well, first of all, I believe in quality conversation while you're driving and riding. But it's a 44-hour round-trip drive to Glacier Park, particularly when the train wasn't running, which we wanted to take, so we drove. And while we're waiting on traffic at the stoplight, that's a real picture of a stoplight in Montana, I was navigating, but there's not much navigating to do when you stay on the same two-lane road for 300 miles. So I took this out, and these slides, all these text slides, were done while we were driving down that road. And people say things like, well, you know, I can do that on a computer. And I say, where's your computer? It's in my office. I can do it on my laptop. Where's the laptop? Well, it's back in my suitcase back there. This is, you know, something to read with, something to entertain yourself with, something to work with not even a heartbeat change, with a battery life of a couple of days. What are the major changes, trends? Well, first of all, internet TVs. Who's got an internet TV here? Anybody? One? What do you have?
And the Apple, isn't that considered?
Apple TV, yep. Internet TV is going to be huge. These companies are just dying to get into your living room and take over your TV experience. The cloud, that's a big trend, and vendor failures are going to be a big trend. There was one dominant PC operating system, it's Windows. There are at least 7 major ones today, although I do have a list of 12 that actually exist. Almost none will survive. Let's talk about that internet TV thing. Here's 4 brand names: Roku, Boxee, Apple TV, and Google TV. And of course, it's the 2 at the top aren't big known electronics firms. The 2 at the bottom are big, except that Google doesn't make any hardware thing at all. Apple makes every hardware thing, from desktop to laptops to phones to everything. So they're 2 different positions. Google's a one-trick company. They make a search engine and give away their Android operating system. So these are the 2 that are going to be competing. Fortunately, they're coming at it from entirely different angles, and people are going to be able to decide. And companies like this that don't have any other thing to offer are going to be hard-pressed to survive with these companies around. These companies, Apple or Google, might buy one of those out, for example.
Yeah, somebody have to buy them.
Yeah. And so this is the Apple TV. All it is a computer, a real computer. It's got an operating system. You interface it to the internet. You put your Netflix movie account in there. It doesn't have a screen, uses the TV screen. It doesn't have a remote. or a connector, because I use my cell phone for a remote, I use the iPad for a remote, and it comes with a thumb-sized remote, which you never can find. It's always in the cushions of the couch, so I use this. That's the Apple's approach, and it's connected to your wireless network in the house, just like every other computer, and then through Apple today, they provide a bunch of applications that are loaded on it previously to go to Netflix as one, go to YouTube as one.
Local stations, though.
Pardon?
Can you get local stations?
No.
So
There's
it's not replacement.
not at all. You can get thousands of podcasts. If you didn't see a news program last night, you can pull it up today. Thousands of those, and they're all free. You can buy Apple Music and movies from Apple, and probably within 2 or 3 months, you'll be able to download apps onto that. It's got the same operating system, the same processor as this, and you'll buy apps to put on there for different things or download them. And that's what they're going toward. And then you can see the difference. There's the Google version. There's the controller that they have. They've tried to put all the capabilities of the internet on your TV and turn it into a computer. A lot of people might like this if you really want a full internet on TV, but most people want a TV and not an internet. And so this would have a browser and it would have everything else, but it takes a keyboard like that to run it rather than a 1 or 2 finger application like this. Matter of fact, with that device, I can pull up a video, YouTube or anything, some videos I've done, whatever I've done, pull them up, hit the transmit button, it'll go over through that up onto the TV. I take slideshows. I was sitting at Christmas time, my wife said, let's play some Christmas music, and I'm in the kitchen table, computer's down in the other room, so I just went over. You go through that, I mean, you're not obvious, but you go through that and pulls music up off of my computer in my office, puts that out through the TV. Then I said I wanted a slideshow, so I picked one off of my computer, ran the slideshow up there, and then went back to work here, and there was no wired connections anyplace in it. And this is what my screen looks like with the Apple TV right there.
So have you read anything that says when the internet TV will actually have the live news broadcasts?
Well, you know, there's so much fighting going on between the media companies and the technology companies, and you know, somebody's got to figure out a way to pay somebody to make these agreements, and so, you know, bits and pieces of it are going to come along. You know, some network's going to sign a deal with Google or with Apple or with both, and next year there will be an Apple TV, one that you buy that has the Apple thing built in. You can buy TV sets now that have the Android operating system built in rather than a separate box. Most TVs a year from now will be internet connected.